gave you in the first little bit. That's 1 chance in 40 million of it coming out by chance. Okay? Would you like to try doing that? If you played my little game, well, you've got, if you work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, that seems reasonable. 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, that is. Give you weekends off. 50 weeks a year. That means there's 2,000 man-hours person hours, girls, sorry, per year. And, or 120,000 minutes per year. To get 7 to 9 chances, your chance of getting any specific sequence in that would be 1 chance in more than 40 million. So if it takes you 10 minutes per draft, you do one of these and try it and turn it in. If you can do one every 10 minutes, you can knock this off in about 3,362 years. Which is a crude way of pointing out that it's not likely to happen except by design. You follow me? Okay. It gets worse, gang. There are examples that we're going to talk about where we're not talking about 9 rules. We're going to talk about 34 rules. When you get to, especially the Gospel of Mark, there's a lot of debate about the last 12 verses of Mark. And one of the astonishing discoveries is that it has heptadic structures that comply to over 70 constraints. We're just taking half of those here. And they turn out to be a very big number. For 34 constraints, you're talking about 5 times 10 to the 28th tries. There are about 3 times 10 to the 7th seconds per year. Let's assume you could try 400 million per second by using a supercomputer. You program a computer to generate these drafts. If you got 4 times 10 to the 8th tries per second, it would still take over 4 million computer years. So if you had a million supercomputers, you take about another 4 million years using them. I want you to get used to recognize that's what we call design, in contrast to randomness. Someone designed this, did it deliberately. And we're obviously studying the discoveries of Dr. Ivan Panin. His books are well distributed. You can get your hands on them if you're interested. He was born in Russia in 1855. He got exiled at an early age, got involved with a plot against the Tsar. So he emigrated to Germany and then to the United States. He graduated from Harvard in 1882 and discovered Jesus Christ. Now, every one of us in this room that has discovered Christ is a result of a miracle. But if you got a PhD in mathematics from Harvard, that's even a bigger miracle. Okay? But he discovered, after he became a Christian, he discovered what's now known as the heptadic structures that underlie the biblical text. He discovered that in 1890. He committed the next 50 years of his life generating over 43,000 pages of discoveries. Very tedious reading. This stuff is tough to go through because it's tedious, tough work. He didn't have a computer to help him either. He's doing this manually. But his discoveries are astonishing, and that's obviously what we're sharing here, and you can check them out, and they do check out, by the way. And he went to the Lord in 1942. And I do suspect that the Lord said, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Now, the comprehensive, I want to carry this just a step further. The New Testament consists of 27 books. So there's a word that opens the book, and there's a word that closes the book, right? So if you got 27 books with a front and end, you have 54 words, right? If you take the total New Testament, the vocabulary of all the first and last words put together, there are 28 different words. It's a multiple of 7 exactly. Oh. The ones in the Gospels, it's also 7 different words, open and close the Gospels. Again, a multiple of 7 exactly. If you take the geometrical value of that, it also is a multiple of 7 exactly. The shortest word is a single letter. It happens to have a value of 70. That's multiple of 7, obviously. The value of the longest word has a value of 1,512, which happens to be 7 times 6 times 6 times 6. The word is apocalypsis. I think that's kind of interesting. Now, this is the one of all of these that blows me away. But you got to think it through. The vocabulary of Matthew, as evidenced by his gospel, if you take all the words there and make a list of the different words, you'll discover that the vocabulary that is unique to Matthew. These are words that you'll only find in Matthew. You don't find anywhere else in the New Testament. The vocabulary that's unique to Matthew occurs 42 times. That's a multiple of 7 exactly. And there are 126 letters represented by this vocabulary. That's unique to him. It's a multiple of 7. Now let's stop and think for a second. The only thing that this vocabulary I'm talking about has that's distinctive is that none of the other writers, there's 7 other writers, there's 8 altogether, 7 other writers, don't use those words. If you want to assume this happened accidentally, that's mathematically disputable. If you say, well, no, somebody has just been very, very clever here. Great, no problem. How did he do this? There's only 2 ways. He had to get the other 7 guys, all 8 guys sat down, and they agreed not to use those 42 words, the other 7. How many think that happened? I don't think so. Or you can use this feature as an argument that Matthew had to have written his last. How else could he organize this? The only way he could make this happen, if it's deliberate on his part, is to have all the other writings in front of him. How many think that happened? But see, you could use this as an argument that Matthew wrote his book last, except the problem is, see, he either had prior agreement with everybody or his gospel was written last. Unique to Matthew. Well, the Gospel of Matthew has this characteristic, so does the Gospel of Mark. If you take the vocabulary that Mark, or Peter if you will, have for Mark's Gospel, it's a number of words, number of letters that are a multiple of 7 exactly. So that proves that Mark must have written last. Except the same thing's true of Luke. The vocabulary in the Gospel of Luke and Acts put together is unique. The vocabulary is unique, is a multiple of 7 exactly. So is John. Each one of these was written last. Whoops. So is Peter, James, Jude, and Paul. Each one must have been written last. Because each one has a vocabulary that's distinctive to it, that's a multiple of 7 exactly. Now when you start to think about this, you begin to realize there's no way that this could have been cleverly engineered. Because these guys are writing at different times under different circumstances. You follow me? Doesn't compute. Some of these clusters of 7 bridge the Old and New Testament. The term hallelujah occurs 24 times in the Old Testament, 4 times in the book of Revelation, or the New Testament. 24 plus 4 is 28, a multiple of 7 exactly. Hosanna, shepherd. There's a whole list of these. I just put some of them on here. That Jehovah Sabaoth is 285 times in the Old Testament, twice in the New Testament. But whatever the numbers are, it's always a multiple of 7. If you take the Old and the New Testament, it's one book. One book. Wow is right. When you begin to embrace this, when you begin to understand what this is really saying, it gives you an awe and a respect for the Bible that is shared by no other book on the planet Earth. It is supernatural in its origin.